Hi, I'm Ben Norris. I'm the audio and podcast content creator at Scotty's Little Soldiers, and this is our annual review. Every charity, by law, has to submit its annual financial statement to the Charity Commission. These statements are publicly available and downloadable from the Commission's website, but they're financial documents, and that means they have to follow a strict format which isn't always the easiest for many of us, like you and I, to read or understand. They're written for accountants and people who deal with numbers on a day-to-day basis. So as well as publishing the full annual financial report, Scotty's has decided to produce what we think is a more user-friendly version, which we've called our Supporter Annual Review. The Supporter Annual Review tells you, our supporters, what the key challenges of the year were, how we tackled them, how much money we raised, and how we used those funds to benefit the bereaved British Forces children and young people. So you're about to hear a conversation between myself and our CEO, Stuart Robinson, where we talk through what you can find in our Supporter Annual Review for 2020. Okay, so Stuart, we're here, we're sat down, we are looking at a big document of stuff that I've not even delved into yet properly. So we've got the annual review in front of us. What are we looking at? Talk me through it.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. So this is what we're going to spend the next sort of period of time doing. We're going to talk about this annual review. So what is an annual review? What is an annual report? Right. Well, every charity has to submit their financial statements to the Charity Commission. Right. So anyone that wants, if you want to go and look at the financial performance of any charity, you can go to the Charity Commission website, look up the charity, and it will be there. And what we have found is those are financial statements, right? So they have to follow a strict template. Mm-hmm. And actually, to a lot of us, myself included, before I got involved in the charity, they don't necessarily mean a lot because there's a lot of numbers. They are for financial professionals. If you don't quite know how to interpret some of the information, you can read it wrong. You can, and so we looked at that and we kind of said, right, okay, how can we be more open and transparent with our supporters and communicate what we're doing in a way that is going to be kind of more digestible, more understandable? So what we said we'd do is, of course, we've got to do that financial statement. We're going to put that on the Charity Commission website, have to do that. But let's do an almost like a nicer version, I suppose, to kind of put out to the supporters, put it on our website, share it with them in a way that maybe kind of explains some of the numbers a little bit more. And so that's what we've done this year. I think the guys have done a great job. And then we said, this is all about, it's not about hiding. We want to be the most open charity there is out there. So how can we find other ways of talking about this stuff? And so that's why, as well as like publishing the annual review, we're calling this version the Supporter Annual Review, as opposed to the kind of financial annual report, which is all the heavy numbers stuff. As well as publishing this, how else can we kind of, get this stuff out there? And so we said, well, let's have a chat about it. Let's talk through it. Let's do a podcast. And at the same time, let's film it and put that out and try and make it as accessible as possible to our supporters. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a financial report that's the big heavy hitter. That's the crunchy stuff. We've got the annual report, which is the sort of dumbed down but accessible way of looking at it. And then if you want to go and look at the big stuff, you can. It is out there.
Yep.
And then this is the sort of, okay, I know it's out there, haven't had the time to read it. Tell me what's in there. Tell me what's been going on, and that'll do. And then I'll go and look at it later kind of version.
Yeah, 100%. So if you go through this and you've still got some questions, go and take a look at that more in-depth report on the Charity Commission, or get in touch with us and ask us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so where do we start then?
Right, well, let's start. I mean, we've got this nice bold front cover, which the guys have worked on, and is a bit different really for us, because normally we'd have like quite an impactful photo on the front cover, and remember this is the annual report for 2020. So we're almost feels like we're like practically a year behind all the time, but that's we get until the 31st of October to publish the report for the previous year, right? So. And we all know what happened in 2020. And actually, we don't have a lot of photos, funnily enough, from us. But we decided to go for something that was quite bold and really kind of in keeping with some of the work that we've been doing at the moment. So we've got this nice bold front cover, and then as we kind of skip through to the next pages, we did want to introduce some sort of imagery and some photos and whatever. And actually, to be honest, this is what 2020 looked like for most of us. These are examples of a virtual call with a load of families that we've been supporting, different activities that we've been doing. You can see some really fun activities going on. This is what 2020 looked like for us. So we thought that was quite a really great way of kicking off the report, the review, if you like. And then as we kind of like move a bit forward, always really important just to start with a mission. We never forget that this is at the very top of everything that we're kind of doing. We've got the mission, which, as you know, is to support, provide relief from the effects of bereavement to children and young people who have experienced the death of a parent who served in the British Armed Forces. And it's something that we go over it so many times just to keep reinforcing it. Never forget this stuff. It's so important. And then, obviously, as we look over onto the next page, you've then got the note from Nikki. So Nikki, obviously the founder, and she talks here about reflecting on 2020 and. I guess, at the beginning of the year, a lot of the uncertainty is about how are we going to deliver support? How are we going to finance that? But then also that kind of sense of pride towards the end of the year of realizing like, wow, what an effort that everybody had kind of put in and not just the team, but the supporters as well to help us, maintain the sort of fundraising element.
Yeah, I think reading that note from Nikki is probably one of the most important things you could do as a supporter and to get an idea of what 2020 was like for the charity. I mean, it was a weird year for everyone, but it kind of puts a bit of the challenges into perspective.
Definitely, yeah. No, it's a good place to start. And like you said, if you don't read the rest of the report, then like start with Nikki's note, and that's a good kind of summary, if you like. And then we've obviously got a nice little picture there of Nick and some of the kids from a previous year. Obviously, no social distancing. And then the contents of kind of like what you can expect to see coming up. So we're going to talk a little bit very briefly about our core values. We've got a couple of pages on the work that we actually did. Some case studies. It's really important to talk more about the young people that we're supporting and the impact of that support. So there's a little bit on that. Of course, we want to talk about fundraising. It's an important part of an annual review. Maybe the bit that people are often most interested in is the financial side of things. So we've got 2 pages on that, which we think is like a nice snapshot of our finances, and then a little bit about the future and perhaps how people might want to get involved going forward. So we shall move on. So always, again, just like the mission, always important to come back to these promises. And we've got this nice, quite powerful image of Brooke there with her dad, Lee, who was killed in Afghanistan. Really powerful image. And then on the other side of the page, we've got the promises that we've made to these young people, and then our core values. And we've spoken a lot about the values in earlier podcasts. So there's a lot of detail if anyone's interested to go back and listen to some of those. But again, these are really important. We really live these values. So no apologies for going over them again or seeing them again, constantly. I don't think you can over communicate this stuff. It's so important to us. So, obviously we put the families first. That's number one. We want to make sure, part of the reason we're doing this podcast and this review is that, we want all of our supporters to be treated like VIPs. We want you to come on the journey with us. So this is an example of kind of living that value, if you like. Number 3 is about loving what we do. Vital, for us that we really love what we do and we're really passionate about our work. And then, of course, remember every day. And that image of Brooke on the side there is something. If you can't walk around the office here at HQ without probably seeing that image in particular a few times. So, again, just kind of reinforcing the importance of that. So
I've got to say as well, like, if you are looking through the document and being part of the team, you kind of see it everywhere. We talk about the values being important, but they are everywhere. And the document itself shows you that. I mean, we skipped over the double page spread with all the images, but even so, that's the families right up in center. And that's just one of them. I mean, we've talked about Brooke being there and remembering, and they are scattered throughout not only this document, but everything we do. So it makes sense to keep shouting about them and keep having them up front like that.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about these things when you get your head down in the day job, isn't it? And it's important that we put this front and center. So moving on, we've got probably a couple of the sort of most text heavy pages, really, just about the work that we're doing. Just a summary, on the left hand side there. We talk about how we've kind of gone about the delivering the support. We talk a little bit about the 4 programs that we have. So if you again, we've covered this in earlier podcasts, but if you're not familiar with how we go about providing that support, we've got these 4 programs as a little introduction to each of those. So you've got the Smiles one, which is obviously focused on the fun side of things and engaging with families and creating a sense of community. You've got support where we are looking at the more emotional health and well-being side of things, and actually recently, we talk about it here, but in 2021, as we record the podcast, we've now introduced direct one-to-one support with children and young people themselves, which is a big step forward for us. Then you've got the Strides program, which is very much focused on education and development. And then finally, the Springboard one, which was something that we'd been planning for some time, but really kind of kicked off actually during 2020, and Emma joined the team. And that's for young adults aged 18 to 25. So, so that's a little introduction into how we go about our work. And then on the following page, we've got some more specific details, I suppose, about the challenges of working around the pandemic, and we mentioned earlier, Nikki referenced it in her note at the beginning, but really it's the uncertainty of, just not knowing what's going to happen, all these mass participation fundraising events being cancelled, everybody being at home, how are we going to pay for this stuff, whilst at the same time, the level of support and the demand for support was kind of rocketing. And so that kind of presents challenges on 2 fronts, doesn't it? Demand for your services is going up at the same time that your income streams are going down. So,
And so I'm assuming that we're going to see a lot of that theme. They're talking about the pandemic and how it impacted the year throughout the document. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, you can't ignore it, can you? It was there for pretty much the whole year. I mean, I remember we shut down the office, I think it might have been the last week of March, and didn't come back again, no one, and it is that uncertainty, no one really knew are we going to be back in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, like what lies ahead. And so it did affect the whole year. So, but I think, Nikki referred to how proud she was of how we adapted. I think that's the key thing, and that's what we'll see in this document, is how we innovated, I suppose, in many ways, how we pivoted, how we want to describe it, but how we changed the way that we both fundraise, but also how we deliver the service to families, and those changes will be with us forever, and there's a lot of things that we're doing today that happened, we were almost forced to do during 2020 that actually have worked out okay for us, and we'll continue doing those things. So I don't
think anyone can deny that what's happened over the last year and a half is going to not have a change on everything going forward. So I think that's fair to assume.
Yeah, so on the next page, we've got our 4 family programs that I've just described, and we've got some nice little icons here, just pulling out some of the highlights, I guess, just trying to find a nice kind of graphical way, an easy way of as I say, just kind of pulling out the highlights of each program. So, I mean, I'll talk you through. So we've obviously got Smiles. So the guys undertook 752 activities with young people during the lockdowns. I mean that's a phenomenal amount, but that was what we realized was we actually needed to increase that engagement with family. We need almost, in some respects, kind of keep these guys busy, keep them, a bit of distraction, let them know that we're here. That was one of the most important things that we said, especially in those early days, is that at a time when there's all this uncertainty, and you've got to remember for the young people that we support, they have already experienced death in their lives. And now we've got this global pandemic, and everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
And so the key thing there really was that we reach out and we let them know they're there. So that the guys organised all sorts of virtual quizzes and activities, whether that was group online group events or things that you could do yourself and so on. So there's a load of stuff that they organised there, which is brilliant. Amazingly, we did get this period towards the end of the year, didn't we, where things opened up a little bit. There's a lot of restrictions still in place. But that meant that we did actually manage to provide 177 young beneficiaries with the opportunity to take their family away and have a respite break. I mean, that was just amazing to be able to offer. You can just imagine how, I know how we were all just kind of, cooped up. And so to have the opportunity to go somewhere else, and okay, a lot of the activities weren't going on in the parks and so on, but just, brilliant that we were able to do that. That was fantastic. A lot of support from the Veterans Foundation to help make that happen as well. And then we always have our annual Christmas event, which is, the showpiece event of the year. And I guess we were sort of back into the kind of lockdown period or, heading that way at that point. That was just never going to happen like it did usually. But, we're not ones to just kind of go, okay, well, we can't do that then, can we? How do we innovate? How do we change? So we held it virtually. We had 160 of our beneficiaries attend that, and that was a great success. And it's brilliant just to be able to do something. Just because we can't do what we'd normally like to be doing, let's find another way of smiling and having some fun. So.
Yeah, I almost feel like our beneficiaries' sort of lockdown life. If you think about it, it's not as different from what our lockdown lives were. We were all suddenly trying to do things online, like doing online classes and, trying to work out at home and things like that. It's the similar stuff, but it's from here, and it's putting into perspective the fact that things that we wouldn't think about as, who we are in our life experiences, that a pandemic's going around and people are talking about death and dying, and that can be a problem,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really good to see that. I think the middle one, the breaks towards that period in the middle of the end of the year, that's the one that stands out, I think, to me.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into kind of the next area, which is the support program. So we've got this engagement. We've told families that we are still here for you. We've not gone home. We're not sitting. We're still working. We have gone home actually, but we're still working. You know what I mean? And so, as well as doing those activities, you're right. It's understanding the challenges that the pandemic is, can present. And so we saw our the number of support cases rocket. So again, we adapted and we launched a few virtual sessions for parents that parents and carers that they could drop into our coffee mornings and the grab a glass evening that we were doing during the lockdowns. We made sure that we started doing regular communication. So every week there'd be an email that went out to the families with either what we were doing, what we had on offer for the families, but also if there were any guidelines or any questions that maybe had come through the government that there's a lot of noise at this point, and it's like where who should you be listening to? Where do you get the relevant information about certain things? So we're just helping to signpost that, and a lot of one-to-one work with families. That those cases kind of shot up, and it's, as it says in the report, in April alone we had 101 cases, which for us is a phenomenal amount. One-to-one level. So that was some important work there.
Interestingly, now that I'm sort of jumping the gun a little bit, but now that we are focusing on one-to-one support, do you expect to see that number be that high sort of this time next year?
Yeah, it'll be different. So it probably, the total number will probably be high, but we're doing it in a different way because at this point our one-to-one support was with the parent or carer. So we still do that. We've got Charlie on the team who still does that with like direct support. How can we help a parent or carer help their young person, and help the family unit as a whole? But now we've introduced the direct support to the children and young people as well. So I would say the number of cases that we would have supporting parents and carers would go down a bit, but we weren't doing the young people at that point. So the kind of total number was probably going to go up because we're doing more work. It's also as these kind of services establish themselves, more and more families are finding out about them, which is fantastic, which we want. So we'll probably see levels maintain or go up because of that. But certainly there was a big spike because of COVID.
Yeah.
So we've then got our Strides program, which is all about education and development. And it was a tricky year for Strides, with everyone kind of being at home, homeschooling. We did introduce a new small financial grant for Scotty members that were transitioning to a new school. We've identified that as a particular time when I'm not going to use the word challenge, but a particular time in a young person's life transitioning to a new school, which can be a bit tricky and can trigger things. So we kind of recognize that, and we've done some work around that, not just in terms of financial support, but also in kind of transition packs and information and so on. So that was something that we did do that was new. We launched the Apache group. So this is something that we did for the first time, where we're introducing year groups. So you've got, throughout the number of members that Scotty's has, they're all different ages. You've got some really young guys, and then some of them have been with us for a little while, and teens, and they all are all need different levels of support and guidance at different ages. So actually, if you can bring a cohort together that are a similar age, and you can kind of create a small group around them, you can deliver support and guidance which is relevant specifically to their age, but also you're creating a little peer-to-peer support group there as well. So Apache was the first of those, and they named the groups, and since then we've added Challenger, and we'll continue. But we focused on very specific age groups that are either like transitioning to new schools, or going into kind of looking at exams and those kinds. So this is something that's kind of evolving further. But Apache was the first group that we launched last year. So. And we still managed to deliver 249 grants throughout the year, which will be down on previous years because a lot of our grants are based on getting people out and about and activities and these kind of things, which obviously a lot of that stuff couldn't happen. So,
did you see a lot of call for grants around schooling and stuff with schools transitioning to homeschooling?
Yeah, I think we saw a switch from like the beginning of the pandemic was very much support focused, mental health, that side of things. And then as I'm not going to say people got more comfortable with it, because that's the wrong word, but as people kind of
adapted.
I suppose so, and the threat didn't go away, but we were sort of containing it to a certain extent, I suppose. Then the thoughts go, well, hang on, this is going on for quite a while now. How's that going to affect my child's education? So at that point, we start to see more inquiries around what help is there for whether it's financial or guidance. We had obviously a cohort that would be going off to university, and that was a very different experience, or exams and how that panned out. So it was we did a lot of drop-in sessions and so on that talked around that. So yeah. And then the final program is Springboard. So this is something that we'd been working on for a couple of years, developing it. Fun fact, it was actually called Seniors to start with. It was a project name, and then we moved on to Springboard. And then we managed to recruit Emma to join the team to actually kind of lead that program and move it forward. So that's a really exciting one for the future, but it was great to kind of get it started. We had 31 young adults that became springboarders, as we know them. And that's brilliant, because prior to that, you reach 18, and that was really where the end of our support came. And, by definition, children and young people, can go up to 25, and those guys arguably might need as much support as any other. So really, it can be a really challenging time. There's a lot of changes going on in your life. So we felt it just didn't feel right. So we knew that we had to do something else, and Springboard's kind of the way that we'll tackle that going forward. And hopefully, it's amazing already to see some of these guys developing into young adults, amazing people. So that's brilliant. Yeah. So we move on. We've got a really nice graphical page next. This infographic that Bailey's put together, which kind of summarizes a whole chunk of the things that we've done. I mean, there's too much stuff here to go into details, but it's a really nice one. I mean, there's a couple of things perhaps we'll pull out. I really like the member watched FA Cup final with Prince William. That was a pretty cool highlight to be asked, approach. I mean, he had this was up kind of up this way, actually. This would have been over at Sandringham. And he had a very small number of people that he entertained in the garden, and they had the big screen they watched, and we were lucky enough to have the opportunity to send one of our members to go and watch that with him, that was pretty cool.
My favorite is the number of Disney Plus grants issued.
Yes, that is a good one.
That's quite fun. I like that a lot.
Do you know that? And that's an example of like that happened quite early on, and we're just looking at it going like these guys, like everyone's at home, like, and I mean, you could just imagine what it's. I mean, I know what it's like to have, like, you're still trying to work, and yet you're trying to entertain children and or homeschool. So we kind of, it's not the kind of usual thing that we would do, but we felt that it was really fitting this year to offer a grant to cover the cost of the Disney Plus service, which had just launched. So it was perfect, on demand. And so I'm sure that kept some people very busy for a fair few hours.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was a strong one, yeah. But yeah, I would encourage anyone to kind of like take a look at the report and just have a little scan through there, because there's quite a lot of stuff in there. We've got a couple of pages that follow on from there, which are our case studies. So we've got 4 families across the 2 pages here. And I can't do this justice, so again, this is where maybe the podcast isn't the right media for doing this. So I would strongly rate, if you've got like 10 minutes to have a read through, because these are this powerful stuff, and it just gives you an idea of the families that were supporting, maybe the need, their background, the needs, I mean, we've got, there are stories here from army families with an army background, but also, Royal Marines, and we support obviously RAF and Navy families. And so it's, we're trying to show supporters the range of families that can receive support and the different types of death. And then a little bit about what Scotty's means to them and how we've been able to help that family. And there are 4 really kind of powerful stories there. That, as I say, I can't do justice to them over the mic, but I would encourage people to just have a little scan through those and have a read through those. Yeah,
I think the case studies that we put out are that thing that reinforce the why, right? That's the remembering. And I get, you're right in a way. You can't tell someone else's story in the right way. And these have quotes from the families and things. So yeah, it's definitely worth a read.
Yeah. Well, what I love about these as well is that families comes first, right? So core value number 1. So we try not to be too pushy about things. We don't like to ask too much. So when families are kind of coming forward and being and are really keen to do, we're not having to it's not that difficult for us to get the feedback from the families. And for me, that's really nice that they genuinely want to kind of to give that feedback and help us as well. So I think that's really important. We've got a couple of pages on fundraising, and if you do have a read, I love this image of the three dogs there in front of the Chinook. That's
might be my favorite picture in the whole thing, to be honest.
It's a cool and it's a phenomenal fundraising effort, and I'm really pleased to say that they're back fundraising for us in 2021 as well. So yeah, and this is phenomenal fundraising effort. This is where you go into that period, March, April time, and you're just like, what are we going to do? How are we going to keep paying the bill? We've got this increase in demand for our support. We've got to do that. Like, it's never in doubt, right? So how are we going to fund that? And you just don't know at that point. And then very quickly, you kind of, right, we need to innovate. We need to get on top of this. We need to, one of the things that I think the team did really well is that because the families team were doing all this great work, we just talked about it a lot. We just said, look, this is what we're doing to help bereaved forces families during this difficult time. And we found that the more we spoke about that, and the more that we showed it, the more people started coming to us and saying, well, I was going to do this fundraiser, but I can't do it. But now I'm going to do it at home. I'm going to climb the stairs, to the same, height as Mount Snowdon, or I'm going to do it. And so we end up seeing quite a lot of people doing things on their own, and you were able, obviously, at certain points to go out as a family unit and cycle. And, a lot of people picked up some new healthy habits and maybe some unhealthy ones as well. But, so actually people started to think differently about how they could fundraise. And what's great is some of that has stayed, but also we're able to hopefully bring in now, more of the mass participation events as well. So we've got maybe some new ideas about how we can fundraise. So that was great. And then the other thing I've got to talk about is a number of grant providers and corporate partners who really kind of stepped up and helped us, and there were some emergency COVID grants that were available, and again, for the team, we had to acknowledge that, see where the opportunities were, and go get them. But they were there, and that was a real lifeline. And we mentioned some of them in here. There's probably too many to talk about now, but I mean, I mean, Annington Homes, I would call out, because they've been a supporter for the last 3 or 4 years now, and touch base all through the year. Really, we were due to receive. They've donated £50,000 for the last 3 years to help fund the support program, and they were really quick. So that gets delivered in April. So we're at the end of March, not knowing what's going on, and very quickly they got on the phone to say, "Don't worry, the money's still coming," which is a relief for me when I'm trying to balance the books and so on. And then they kept in touch all throughout the year, and then towards the end of the year, it was a challenging time. It looked like we were going to end up with a deficit, which is charity terms for a loss. And we'd been keeping them abreast of the situation, and they made an additional donation of £30,000 to make sure that didn't happen. Actually, we ended up having quite a strong last few months, and we'll get to the finance bit on the next page. But we did finish with a surplus, so a small profit, which is great. But Annington, Armed Forces Covenant Trust, again, some key organisations that kind of came to the rescue, I suppose, in many sense.
I think we've said before, I think like privately, but also in other episodes, about how if you're not privy to like the charity world and how it works, you probably don't think of grants and trusts as something that's going on. You're not really key to it. And I think being part of the charity has opened my eyes to that, and it's so interesting to see how that works and how important that is to charity, not only in a year where stuff was going on, but in general as well. So yeah, if you're listening and you're keen on sort of really knowing how things work on an intimate level, this document tells you that in ways that aren't just sort of standard, like, oh yeah, charities, it's fundraising. It's like we're actually talking about how it works here.
We go into quite a bit of detail on that, and I think it was episode 4 of the On the Mission series.
Yeah, it's one of them.
Yeah, we talked about the fundraising, if you like. I suppose we don't like to use the word fundraising here, because we like to use supporter experience, because at the end of the day, we want to give you value and a great experience once you've decided that you want to fundraise for us based on what you the work that we're doing and what you've seen. So we tend to avoid using the word fundraising, but it's an important part. If we don't have the money to fund the programs, then we're in all kinds of trouble. So individuals stepped up with their fundraising, which was amazing. Corporate partners grants, and then a couple of other things that we acknowledge on this page is we launched Overwatch, which is another example of innovation. So this is a long-term income stream for us going forward. So this is really about it's regular. Charities have regular giving, but we think this is regular giving with a difference. This is about giving you access to the charity and seeing behind the scenes, seeing how you're, if it's £10 a month that you're giving, how we're using that £10. And we do say with Overwatch, 100% of your donation goes direct to the family program, so there's no running costs. We'll talk about running costs in a minute, but there's no running costs coming out of the Overwatch money, So that was an important one for us long term. of course we've got Mr. Morgan in the top corner there, who appeared on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which obviously has the potential to raise a fair chunk of money as well as awareness. And Piers, bless him, he, love him or hate him, he's a bit Marmite, isn't he? But we love him here because he's been a big supporter of the charity, and he had the opportunity to go on the show, and he picked us as the charity that he wanted to raise money for, which is amazing in the first place. And then when he got a question wrong, he made up the difference out of his own pocket, which is pretty, and fair play. And he did do that. He said that he'd do it on the TV. He did. I can confirm he did do that.
It wasn't just words.
No, he did it out of his own funds. So fair play to him. Yeah,
I remember that happening as well, because I wasn't part of the team at that point. I remember that being everywhere, and it just shows how important things like that can be for a charity. That kind of awareness factor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all very secret. I mean, we didn't know. People were like, "Oh, you must have known." When did they record it? And think we didn't know. It was all very secret. But yeah, that was a interesting weekend. So then we got the finance page. So this is the bit that a lot of people are interested in, and we've just tried to capture. I mean, the proper financial statement on the Charity Commission website will have all the detail, tons more detail than this. So we're not trying to avoid it. That's there. Go and see that if you want a bit more detail. But we've just tried to pull out the headlines, really, I suppose. So we've got this nice little graphic that shows the progression of the charity in terms of our income over the last year. And, broadly speaking, we've been adding £100,000 a year, over the last 4 or 5 years, which is great. And we're hoping that we're on course to do that again this year, and that fits with our long-term plan over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. We reference it here, and there's another page on our long-term goals in a minute. But we've got this, what we call the big, hairy, audacious goal, which is the North Star, or the whatever you want to call it. But the thing that we're kind of aiming for, which is to be supporting at least 1,000 children and young people annually by 2030. And so if we're going to do that, we need to be adding that £100,000 plus every year. So we need to be by 2030 raising in excess of £2 million. So some really strong performance over it, but the need for the service and the number of young people that we can support will go up. It needs to go up. So we need to keep growing that. So actually, to raise more than we had raised in 2019, bearing in mind what we've just spoken about with COVID, was a pretty phenomenal effort. I mean, I think we would have, without that, hopefully been on course to probably deliver more than that. But I certainly think, the way that fundraisers got behind us, supporters got behind us, and those emergency grants and corporate support offset any loss that we might have experienced otherwise. So that's the income side. And on the other side, we've got the expenditure. We did cut back on expenditure again because of the uncertainty. We had events like the Christmas event that you'd always want to do in person. I mean, there are some things that you look at and you go, well, we could save money on that going forwards, actually. But something like that, you wouldn't do. It did save a load of money doing it virtual, but
it's not the same, is it?
It's not the same. It doesn't have the same impact. So there are ways that we managed to cut back as well in terms of that. We didn't furlough any staff. We didn't make any redundancies, but we did cut back in other areas. But obviously, as you can see there, we raised £854,000 and we spent £769. Well within what we raised there. So we finished the year with a bit of a surplus there. And then just under that, we kind of break down the split between charitable activities and cost of raising funds. Always a tricky one. Everybody obviously wants the charitable activities to be as high as possible. To be honest, there's a lot of stuff that charities will put into charitable activities that are running costs. That isn't splitting out all the running costs. We are talking about the difference between fundraising costs and then everything else is in charitable expenditure. So it's not quite as charitable activities. So it's not quite as obvious, and different charities present information in different ways. Mm-hmm. So it's not the kind of like standard that everybody hope, and you can work out a ratio and a percentage and, how much of my pound is spent, on this. it's quite a difficult one. Our aim over the next few years is to be the most open charity there is. So we're going to do a lot more work on not educating sports, but like, you know, showing them how these things are calculated and how we work it out, and being really kind of open book about things. And so this is the kind of first step towards doing that, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's about presenting it in the right way that's accessible as well, because you can get really bogged down in minutiae of how is it all broken down and where does it all go and what does this mean and what does that mean. So it's complicated.
It's complicated stuff. And as the charity grows, it gets more, you know, it's more and more complicated on the finance side, which is, you know, we've got a responsibility to manage those finances on behalf of our supporters and our beneficiaries as efficiently as possible. So, you know, and then the last little chart on that page is a good example. So we've highlighted there the cash that we had in the bank at the end of the year. Now, a lot of people talk about reserves. So the reserves figure in the financial statement, you know, so you go to the Charity Commission site, look at the reserves, that is going to include the cash plus our assets, our fixed assets. So things like the holiday homes that we provide. So yes, in theory, we could sell those. They are worth something, but that's a last resort, isn't it? If we're selling our holiday homes that families use, something's going quite wrong. So that's not liquid cash that we can kind of access. So at the charity, we tend to look at cash more than that kind of official reserves figure. And what we're looking at really is trying to have approximately 6 months at the moment of running costs, operating costs. So if you think about it cost us £769,000 to run the charity during 2020, £410,000. We're kind of on a month by month basis. We're looking at about around six months, and you know, and that kind of continues today. What's the best rate? Well, I don't. You know, it depends from charity to charity. To be honest, there isn't one fit for everyone. We at the moment have targeted 6 months, and our longer term targets are to be between 6 and 9 months. So the lower that figure is, that means that if all your income dries up, you've only got a certain amount of time before you run out of cash, right? So if it's 3 months, that's, you know, for us, certainly that would be kind of like a bit hairy, you know, it's a bit close to the line. So 6 months is pretty good. If you've got more than maybe 9 months, you're creeping up towards 12 months. Some people will look at that and go, well, maybe, do I need to fund you? Because you've got a little bit of money in the bank. So it's a fine line for charities to reach, you know?
Yeah, it seems like such a strange, like from an outside point of view, a strange, I was going to say problem, but it's not a problem, is it? It's just a thing. It's a thing that's there. Like, you've got to have money in case something happens, like, you know, a global pandemic comes out of nowhere. But you also don't want to save so much money that you're not using it for the mission.
Yeah.
And getting that balance. And yeah, I can see like the scales of that being quite tricky to balance properly.
It is a tricky one, and it's one of the biggest differences for me between a charity and a for-profit organization. And you look at everybody, you know, talking about Apple being, you know, one of the most successful companies in the world and the most cash-rich company in the world, and talking about that as if that's a really great thing. And then there's us as a charity. The more cash you've got, the less good that looks, you know, which is kind of weird. And then if you do invest that in fundraising, we talk about that split between charitable activities and the cost of raising funds. If that, you know, in theory, the more you invest in that, the more income you'll get next year. So it means you can spend more money on your charitable activities. So it goes up and up and up. But, you know, I know we have to be sensible about how we do that, because, you know, again, that traditionally can be frowned upon, spending a bit too much money on the fundraising element. So it's a tricky one to balance.
Yeah. And I think would you say that having so much money, obviously that's going to go up. You want to have the balance right. You also want to be able to communicate effectively with the supporters. Like, this is how we're doing it, but we're going to change it slightly because we've made less or more money. So is it always a rolling ball? Is it always going to?
Yeah. It's always balancing. Yeah. It's a continuous balancing act, isn't it? And yeah. So if one year it doesn't go as well from a fundraising point of view, maybe you don't have as much to spend next year, but do you cut back on your services, or do you invest actually a little bit more in fundraising because you want to generate more cash the following year? It's always a tricky balance. the key for us, as we've mentioned a few times, is we want to bring supporters on the journey. So it's not about hiding information, hiding what we're doing. We want to be as open as possible, but to explain that, so if we do, let's say we spend a bit more on fundraising than the average charity does in the next few years. If we decide to do that, it's about explaining why and then showing the impact of that and going, right, guys, like we said that we'd spend a bit more and it generated this, which has meant we've been able to spend more money on the young people, 2 years, 3 years down the road. So yeah, always juggling. So we're getting towards the end now, last couple of pages. And so we're talking about the future. So we're talking about 2021 and beyond, which is, kind of weird since we're well into 2021 already. We've got that big, hairy, audacious goal highlighted there that we spoke about earlier. So to be supporting over 1,000 children and young people by 2030. And then we've got this figure of 452 highlighted, which was the number of children and young people that we supported during 2020. So we're almost halfway. I mean, as we have the benefit of knowing what we've been doing this year. So I can say we're pretty much halfway towards our goal. So we're on course, but a lot of work still to be done.
Does it feel like how confident are we feeling, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not an option for us. That's the thing.
Looking at the numbers, we're feeling good.
It's a hard one because everything over the last 5 years has moved in the right way. And you saw that chart on the income slide where we, for every year we've added this £100,000. So when you look at that, you go, oh, well, we're on the right path, aren't we? But you have to reset and go into each year and make that happen again.
Yeah.
And which is not, and adding, incremental income and, reaching out and finding that, the young people are out there. We've got to do the job we have to do is kind of reach out to them. But at the same time, it's a nice problem to have. But if you suddenly turn around and had 300 new beneficiaries next month, we're going to fall over potentially, So it's that word balance. It's about balancing those finances and then reaching out and supporting as many families as you can at the right time. So
controlled growth.
Yeah, controlled growth. That's a good way of putting it, isn't it? So there's a little bit more information about kind of what we're doing. We've already spoken about the direct one-to-one support, which is something new. We've actually we went into the year and we said, funnily enough, this year wasn't about reaching out to lots of new families. This year was about reviewing our service offer and being really clear about what Scotty's Little Soldiers delivery, what the support is that we are offering bereaved forces families, being 100% clear about that, mapping that out. We've got a really great service map now that kind of is crystal clear about what it is we offer, what we don't offer, how, and how we go about it. And so what I describe it as laying the foundations, really, really solid foundations. That's what we've worked on this year. That we can build on going forward. So there's a little bit in the report here about that. So then on to the final page, which is the get involved page. So this is the we don't do selling a lot here. We've got this. Another inside bit of information, but we've got this thing that we call the 90-10 rule. So that's like when we're talking to supporters and we're putting out content, whether that's on social media or podcast, whatever it might be. 90% of that content, so 9 out of 10, should be about providing value to the person that's reading it, listening to it, watching it, whatever that might be. Telling them about the work that we do, how we're using their funds to support bereaved forces families. And then 10% can be about, right, if you want to get involved, this is how you get involved. So that's broadly speaking how we try and pitch it. So this is a little bit about how you might be able to get involved.
This is that 10%.
This is the 10%. Yeah, exactly. So no, and just a few key things here, like for us going forward, in terms of our strategy, and we've really had to narrow down. Again, we talk about this in one of the earlier podcasts. That we've really narrowed down our fundraising streams. We're trying to do too much and not doing any of it particularly well because we're stretching ourselves too thin. So we've really focused on a few key areas. Overwatch is one. Giving our supporters who decide that they want to fundraise for us a really great experience. digital donations and the digital technology and that side of it, really kind of focusing down on that side of things. And, one or two others, grant fundraising has been key for us over the last couple of years. And then the plan will be like over the next few years to gradually maybe look at, right, let's add one more new income stream and really kind of develop that. And then the next year you add the next one. And then you kind of get to a point where it's that controlled growth, so that's kind of the plan. And there's some information here about how you can get involved, but obviously the website is a great place to start as well if you want to support the charity. And that's the annual review.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't... When you say annual review, and like from an inside point of view as well, like I've been hearing about this document being put together for so long now, you kind of think it's like this big, scary thing. And I guess probably at the start of putting it together, it might be. But looking at this now, I mean, it's not that many pages, but it's condensed and it's concise, and it tells you, what you need to know, but also probably what you want to know. Like I know there will be people who will be thinking, okay, well, I do want to get involved, but I don't know how to. Like, where can I look? This is just another place. Or, I have been supporting and I want to know like the detail about where the money goes and things like that. So yeah, it makes sense. I think you've done a good job there.
Thanks.
I know what you've been talking about the whole time.
I can't take all the credit though. I'm just reading what the team have put together now, and there was a lot of work involved in it, but largely because it was quite a big transition from us doing the kind of the old school traditional kind of financial reports and actually go, what do we want to look this to look like for us? But what if we were a supporter? What would we want to be reading? And so hopefully we've nailed that, but it's not finished by a long way. Like, so next year I think we can be even better. We look at like how can we digitalize it even more? Can we make it more interactive in the future? It'd be really interesting. But I'd definitely be into anyone that's listening to this and either they've read the report or they've just listened to this podcast where or they've watched the video that we're recording. Give us your feedback. What kind of things would you like to know more about, and we'll make sure we try and include that in the next in the next year's one, which will come around sooner rather than
now,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's like one book closes, the other one opens. Cool. Well, I think the only last thing to say then is if someone wants to go and find this, where will it be?
Yeah, so this one will be on our website. So if you go onto the website, we've got a section for our annual reports, and you'll be able to find this there. And then, as we said earlier, if you want the full report, we've actually put this part of it at the beginning and then tagged all the financial data onto the end. And that version is on the Charity Commission site. So those are the two places that you'll be able to find it. So
brilliant. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.